Have you ever felt like your whole life suddenly shattered? Like the floor dropped out from under you and everything you trusted disappeared? Your safety, your certainty, even the person you believed you were, gone in a flash? Now imagine this. You're 17 years old, already a respected warrior, a member of a strong and influential clan. And then, on a blood-soaked morning in October 1600, during the Battle of Sigara, you lose absolutely everything. Your army is slaughtered, your clan is wiped out, your status turns to ash, and you're forced to run like an outlaw just to survive. This was the darkest chapter in the life of Miyamoto Musashi, the man who would later become the greatest samurai in Japanese history. But here's what makes it so gripping. That brutal collapse wasn't the end of his story. It was the start of it. Because in the years that followed, lost in Japan's forests, living as a wandering ronin, Musashi formed 5 mental rules that didn't just keep him alive. They forged a code so powerful that even today, 400 years later, those same rules can pull a person out of the deepest despair. And listen, I'm not talking about vague philosophy or cheap self-help slogans. I'm talking about principles tested in blood, battlefield-proven ideas forged in the kind of pain that breaks most people. The first rule clashes with almost everything you've been taught about dealing with grief. The second rule will hit you with its brutal simplicity. And the fifth rule, the fifth rule is so upside down that most people refuse to believe it works. But it does, and I'm going to show you. Before we go further, do me a favor. How many people do you know who are trapped in a life they don't actually want? How many friends act like everything is okay while inside everything is collapsing? If you've read this far, it's because something in you recognizes this pain. And that isn't weakness, it's courage. Because admitting that we need to change is the first step to climbing out of the hole. So take a deep breath and stay with me. Because what you're about to learn in the next few minutes could be the difference between staying stuck in the same cycle of suffering or finally finding the strength to rebuild your life from the ground up. And trust me, if it worked for a 17-year-old boy who lost everything in a medieval war, it can work for you too. Let's go back to October 1600. Musashi is on the Sigara Plain, in the center of the most important battle in Japanese history. On one side, 80,000 warriors. On the other, another 80,000. In just 6 hours of fighting, everything changed. Musashi's forces were crushed. Tens of thousands were killed. Severed heads lay scattered across the field like spoiled fruit. And Musashi somehow escaped. But escaping wasn't a victory. It was humiliation. Because under the samurai code, dying honorably in battle is worth more than surviving in shame. Now, imagine you're a teenager. You've lost everything. You're being hunted like a common criminal. Your entire identity has been erased in a single morning. What do? Most people would do one of two things. Either end their own life to preserve honor, or spend the rest of their years drowning in regret, drinking, hiding, and trying to numb the shame. Musashi chose something else, something that would reshape not only his life, but the entire mindset of the samurai. First rule, accept the hard reality. He stopped resisting what had happened. And yeah, it sounds simple, but it's not. Accepting reality when it's brutal is one of the hardest things a person can do because the brain is wired to reject pain. When something terrible happens, denial kicks in first. this can't be happening. Then anger, this isn't fair. Then bargaining, if I do this, maybe things will go back to normal. But Musashi skipped those stages. He looked at the wreckage and said, okay, this is my reality now. What's next? Not why me, not this shouldn't have happened. Just what now? That question changes everything. Because once you stop fighting what already happened, all the energy you are wasting on resistance becomes fuel for action. Think of it like this. Your house is on fire. You can either scream, "This house shouldn't be burning," or you can run to the exit. Which one keeps you alive? Acceptance isn't passivity, it's strategy. And there's research from Harvard University that backs this up. Researchers followed people who went through severe trauma, job loss, divorce, death in the family, and found something surprising. The people who recovered fastest weren't the ones who suffered the least. They were the ones who accepted the new reality the quickest. Why? Because acceptance frees you to ask the only question that matters. Given that this happened, what is my next move? Musashi asked that, and it pushed him to the second rule. But before we continue, answer this honestly. What are you denying in your own life right now? What situation are you resisting that only keeps you stuck in pain? Because until you accept where you are, you can't move toward where you want to be. After accepting his new reality, Musashi faced the second major temptation, the desperate search for immediate relief. Think about it. Lost, suffering, directionless. Every day feels like torture. The pain is so heavy, it feels like it might kill you from the inside. At that point, anything that promises relief becomes tempting. Alcohol, food, sex, entertainment, drugs, anything that can make you forget, even for a few hours. In feudal Japan, ronin often became drunken wanderers, compulsive gamblers, or dishonorable mercenaries. It was the expected fate of men who had lost everything. But Musashi rejected it. Second rule, reject weakening pleasures. Instead of chasing comfort, he chose the harder path, extreme discipline. He lived like a warrior monk. He slept outdoors, ate only what he needed to survive, trained for 8 hours a day, meditated, studied, and wrote. Every day became a fight against easy comfort. And modern science lines up with this idea. When you're in pain, chasing quick pleasure doesn't fix the problem. It multiplies it. A Stanford neuroscientist compared people who handled trauma through self-care, meaning constant soothing and pampering, with those who handled it through discipline. Over time, the people who pampered themselves showed even higher cortisol levels, the stress hormone. Why? Because the brain knows you're running from the problem instead of solving it, and that creates even more anxiety. It's like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. It feels like relief in the moment, but later the blaze is worse. But the disciplined group didn't just recover faster, they came out stronger. Musashi understood this instinctively. He knew the suffering he chose was different from the suffering forced onto him. One is random and destructive. The other is intentional and constructive. If you're going to suffer, and you will, because life includes suffering, at least choose a kind of suffering that strengthens you instead of one that destroys you. Discipline hurts at first, but every time you overcome temptation, you grow stronger. Every no to what is easy becomes a yes to who you want to become. It's like building muscle. It hurts, but that pain is progress. Seeking comfort when you should be building is like taking anesthetic before a necessary surgery. It dulls the pain, but it blocks the healing. Musashi later wrote a phrase that captures it perfectly. The path is daily discipline in small things, not heroic one-time acts. Small choices every day between what's easy and what's right. Wake up on time. Do what must be done. Say no to what weakens you. It sounds simple. Try it for a week and you'll discover how hard it really is. But that difficulty is exactly what rebuilds you. Now tell me, what's your escape? What's the thing you use to numb the pain, even though deep down you know it's hurting you? Because until you cut that off, you won't be ready for the third rule. 1612, Gryu Island. Musashi is about to face the most famous duel in Japanese history. Across the beach stands Sasaki Kojiro, the demon of the long sword, one of the greatest swordsmen who ever lived. Perfect technique, lightning speed, and an obsession with killing Musashi. The crowd watches. Gamblers sweat. Everyone knows one of them will die today. And here's the detail that shifted the entire outcome. Musashi arrived 3 hours late on purpose, while Kojiro warmed up, tense and furious, running the duel through his mind. Musashi was calmly carving a wooden sword. When he finally stepped onto the beach, Kojiro exploded, shouting, cursing, threatening, boiling with rage. Musashi stayed calm, breathing controlled, mind clear. The duel lasted 30 seconds. Kojiro, technically superior, lost. His skull was crushed by Musashi's wooden blade. Why? Third rule, your emotions are your enemy. Kojiro fought with anger. Musashi fought with reason. And that's the difference between life and death. This goes against what modern culture constantly repeats. Follow your feelings. Trust your heart. Be authentic with your emotions. But Musashi learned what neuroscience has confirmed. Emotions are awful advisors. A Harvard researcher tracked 2,000 people over 10 years and found that 87% of the decisions people regretted most were made in intense emotional states. Anger, fear, sadness, euphoria. When strong emotion takes over, judgment collapses. That's why you send a message in anger and regret it later. That's why you spend money you don't have when you feel empty. That's why love makes people do irrational things. Emotions were built for emergencies. They are alarms, not GPS. Fear is useful if a lion is chasing you because it makes you run. But when you're rebuilding your life, letting fear lead only freezes you. Musashi developed what he called an imperturbable mind. That doesn't mean he felt nothing. It means he refused to let emotion choose for him. Think of it like flying a plane. You're the pilot. Emotions are passengers. They might scream, cry, panic, but you stay in control. If you let the passengers fly, everyone dies. He used a simple method, the 10-second rule. When a strong emotion hit, he counted to 10 before acting. He breathed. He let the emotional wave rise and fall. Because emotions behave like waves. They surge, peak, and fade. If you ride the wave instead of drowning in it, you keep control. Anger, count to 10. Fear, count to 10. Sadness, count to 10. Then ask, what would the most rational version of me do right now? And then act on reason, not impulse. Does it feel cold? Maybe. Does it work? Yes. How many times have you ruined things by acting too fast? How many opportunities have you missed because fear held you back? How many relationships have you damaged because anger spoke first? If you want to rebuild, you must learn to be the pilot, not the passenger. And here's the paradox. When you stop being a slave to emotions, you become freer to feel them fully. You can feel sadness without making stupid choices. You can feel anger without burning down what you built. You can feel fear without being paralyzed. Emotions become information, not commands. Now tell me, what emotion controls you most? Anger, fear, sadness, anxiety? Because until you can manage it, you will keep sabotaging yourself. But there is an even more dangerous threat. After years as a wandering ronin, Musashi faced an enemy more subtle than any sword, himself. Loneliness crushed him. Days repeated endlessly, and slowly an obsession formed. He replayed the Battle of Sikajara again and again, every moment, every decision, every mistake. What if I had done this? What if I chose that? Why did this happen to me? That constant rumination was eating him alive, like a wound that won't heal because you keep tearing it open. And here's the trap. When your life collapses, it's natural to focus 100% inward. Your pain, your trauma, your story. You become obsessed with yourself. You spiral in circles. But Musashi realized something critical. Fourth rule, stop being the center of the universe. Self-obsession is a prison. So he made a radical decision. Expand the mind beyond personal suffering. He studied philosophy, art, poetry, architecture. He learned calligraphy, painting, sculpture. He traveled, met new cultures, spoke with masters in different fields. He forced his brain to care about things bigger than his own pain. And something incredible happened. The more he learned about the world, the smaller his pain felt. Not because it vanished, but because he gained perspective. Like climbing a mountain. Below, one rock looks like an enormous obstacle. From the summit, you see it's only a tiny part of a vast landscape. Neuroscience explains this too. A University of Michigan study found that people who focus only on their problems activate brain patterns linked to chronic depression. But when they expose their minds to completely different subjects, the brain forms new connections that quiet the suffering circuits. It's as if you give your mind alternative paths besides pain. Musashi practiced a brilliant exercise. Every day he spent at least 1 hour learning something unrelated to what he felt. If he was sad, he studied mathematics. If he was angry, he practiced calligraphy. If he was anxious, he observed nature. The purpose was to break the loop and reconnect the mind with something larger. Because here's the brutal truth. Your suffering, as real as it is still only a tiny slice of the human experience. There are billions of people, billions of stories, countless possibilities. Are you spending all that immensity trapped in a narrow narrative of pain? I'm not saying your pain doesn't matter. I'm saying it isn't the only thing that matters. When you broaden perspective, two things happen. First, you realize you are not uniquely cursed. Others have endured similar losses and rebuilt. That gives hope. Second, you discover mental resources you didn't know you had because your mind was too busy hurting to explore itself. Like living in a mansion but staying locked in the basement. Musashi turned this expansion into a competitive advantage. While others studied only fighting, he studied everything, making him unpredictable and creative. And the same can happen to you. When you stop feeding rumination and start feeding your brain with knowledge, your problem-solving power grows fast. So answer this. When was the last time you learned something completely new? Something unrelated to your current problems? Because a stagnant mind produces stagnant answers. But one final trap remained. 1645. Musashi is now recognized as Japan's greatest swordsman. He has won over 60 duels and never lost. He wrote The Book of Five Rings, still studied by businessmen, athletes, and soldiers. Yet, in a letter to a disciple, he admits something shocking. The most dangerous enemy he ever faced carried no sword. Invisible and silent, it almost destroyed him. What was it? Envy. Even after discipline, emotional control, and expanded perspective, he was still vulnerable to comparing his pain with the apparent happiness of others. He saw samurai who kept their clans, titles, recognition, and it poisoned him. Why do they have everything and I have nothing? Why did suffering pick me? It isn't fair. Comparison became slow venom. Because no matter how much you grow, there will always be someone who seems ahead of you. That's when he discovered the final rule. Fifth rule, gratitude is a weapon. Strategic gratitude, not fake positive thinking, but deliberate training of attention. Musashi taught his mind to focus on what remained instead of what was lost. He still had life, health, freedom, knowledge, experience, the chance to reinvent himself completely. Science supports this too. A neuroscientist at the University of California ran an experiment with 300 people who experienced severe trauma. One group spent 15 minutes a day thinking about what they had lost. The other spent 15 minutes a day thinking about what they still had. After 30 days, their brains looked different. The first group showed more activity in the amygdala, fear, and less in the prefrontal cortex, reason. The second group showed the opposite, less fear, better reasoning, and higher dopamine and serotonin. So gratitude isn't just feeling nice, it's literally retraining your brain to function better. But there's a key. Gratitude can't be generic. It must be specific. Musashi built a ritual. Every night he wrote 3 specific things he was grateful for that day. Not, I'm grateful for life, but I'm grateful I learned a new technique today. Not, I'm grateful for health, but I'm grateful my body survived 6 hours of training. Specificity forces your mind to notice what is working instead of defaulting to what is broken. And it has a side effect. When you train yourself to see what works, you create more of what works. It's like strengthening a muscle. The most surprising part is how he used gratitude in combat. Warriors focused on what they could lose, fought with fear. Warriors focused on what they might gain, fought with pressure. But Musashi focused on what he had already built and earned. That made him calm and unshakable. He entered duels grateful to be alive, grateful for the chance to test himself, grateful to have reached that moment. Not naive optimism, applied psychology. Gratitude creates mental abundance, and abundance creates better decisions. Envy does the opposite. It creates scarcity. Scarcity produces desperate choices. Desperate choices create more scarcity. That's the vicious cycle. So be honest. Do you spend more time thinking about what you have or what you lack? That answer decides whether you're building your life or quietly destroying it. And here's the final irony. The people who practice gratitude most often become the ones who achieve the most. Not because of magic, but because a grateful brain performs better. It spots opportunities. It makes calmer decisions. It attracts people. Gratitude isn't passive. It's a competitive advantage. Musashi also had a hidden 6th rule. He never tried to return to who he was before. While most people in crisis obsess over getting back to their old life, he understood that life had already died. Trying to resurrect a dead version of yourself is wasted effort. Instead, he asked, who can I become with what I know now? He didn't try to be that naive 17-year-old again. He became something new, a warrior philosopher blending strength with wisdom. He used pain as raw material and built a new self. And here's the twist. If Sekihara had never happened, Musashi might have lived and died as an ordinary samurai, skilled but forgettable. The destruction created the conditions for legend. The crisis wasn't the end. It was the beginning, and that applies to you too. Maybe you're grieving who you used to be. Maybe you're desperate to return to normal. But what if that normal was a gilded prison? What if you were living far below your potential? What if this crisis is forcing you to evolve into someone you didn't know was possible? Think about how many people live normal lives while feeling empty. Maybe a broken life is actually life waking up. Because here's the truth people hate. Real growth happens under pressure. Diamonds form under intense pressure. Muscles grow when pushed beyond limits. Character is forged in adversity. When life is easy, you get comfortable and lazy. When life is hard, you develop strengths you didn't even know you had. Musashi understood that. He used the worst experience of his life as fuel to become his best self. And his 5 rules: accept reality, reject shortcuts, control emotions, broaden perspective, cultivate gratitude, are the map he left behind for anyone who wants to make the same journey. It isn't easy, it isn't fast, it isn't comfortable, but it works. So here's my final challenge. Stop trying to fix your broken life. Start building a new one. Use Musashi's 5 rules not to return to who you were, but to become who you can still be. In the end, you have 2 choices. Spend your life mourning the person you lost, or spend your life creating the person you can become. The choice is yours. And if you choose the second path, know this: you are not alone. Musashi left a marked trail. Science supports it, and countless people have walked this road before you. Your broken life is not a curse. It's an opportunity wearing a disguise. The real question is, do you have the courage to accept that opportunity? Because on the other side of that courage is the version of you that hasn't been born yet, but wants to be. And trust me, that version will surprise you. Now tell me, out of Musashi's 5 rules, which one hit you the hardest, and which one will you start using today? Because knowledge without action is just entertainment. And you didn't come this far to be entertained. You came here to be changed. So, what's it going to be?